The Denver airport buzzed with its usual early morning energy. Passengers sipped overpriced lattes, scrolled through their phones, or rushed toward final boarding calls. Amid the crowd, Donnelly Carter walked calmly through Gate 26, ticket in hand, backpack slung over one shoulder. To everyone around her, she looked like an ordinary traveler, just another face in the sea of passengers. But Emily had a history that no one on that plane could have imagined. She boarded Flight 982, bound for Seattle, and found her seat 17A, window side. She gazed out as the tarmac shimmered in the morning sun. Seatbelt clicked, tray table up, phone on airplane mode, everything routine. But nothing about this flight would stay ordinary for long. Emily had once lived in the sky. A former Air Force cadet with advanced flight training, she had logged hundreds of hours in simulators and cockpits before leaving the program to pursue software development. Her decision was personal, a blend of burnout, bureaucracy, and a yearning for normalcy. It had been nearly 6 years since she last touched flight controls. That part of her life felt distant, almost surreal. As the engines roared and the plane lifted from the runway, Emily leaned back and closed her eyes. Flying had once been second nature. Now she preferred being a passenger, away from the responsibility of split-second decisions, away from risk. Or so she thought. 2 hours into the flight, turbulence struck. Minor at first, the kind that made drinks wobble and seatbelts tighten. Flight attendants smiled politely and instructed passengers to remain seated. Emily glanced up mildly, alert but still calm. Then came the second jolt. Far stronger, the plane dropped sharply for 2 terrifying seconds. A few passengers screamed, overhead bins popped open. One oxygen mask fell from the ceiling prematurely. Emily sat straight, her instincts lit up. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing unexpected turbulence. Please remain calm." His tone betrayed his words. He sounded shaken. Emily's fingers clenched her armrest. Something was wrong. Not just turbulence, something mechanical. She could feel it. A deep vibration through the fuselage, a strange pitch in the engine's whine. She looked around. Flight attendants whispered nervously, one gripping the intercom panel tighter than usual. Then a loud bang. The entire plane tilted left, then right. Emily's heart jumped. Oxygen masks now dropped from every row. The cabin filled with gasps and cries and shouts. Babies cried. An elderly man clutched his chest. The plane's lights flickered, and warning alarms buzzed faintly from the cockpit. Emily didn't panic. She processed. Her brain shifted into a mode she hadn't accessed in years. She counted the seconds between jolts, measured the angle of descent. Not a free fall, but a serious drop. Controlled. Maybe. She looked toward the cockpit door, still shut. No one came out. A flight attendant stumbled past, trying to calm passengers. Emily reached out, steadying her. "Tell me what's happening," she said. The woman paused. Her voice trembled. "They've declared a level 3 malfunction. One engine's out. They're trying to reboot systems." Emily stood. The flight attendant tried to stop her, but she raised her hand. "I'm a trained pilot, Air Force certified. If they need help, I can give it." The attendant looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something different. Not panic, not bravado, just purpose. She nodded once. "I'll check." Emily sat back down briefly, heart pounding. She hadn't sat in a cockpit in years. Could she really step in again under these conditions? A minute later, the attendant returned. Co-pilot's down, unresponsive. "Captain wants to see you now." Everything in Emily's life up to this point, all the training, the decisions, the moment she questioned her worth, had led to this one. Unexpected, uninvited, but here it was. She stood, legs surprisingly steady, and walked down the aisle past crying children, terrified passengers, and flickering lights. As she reached the cockpit door, one thought burned in her mind. I didn't come here to fly, but maybe I was meant to. And with that, the door opened. The cockpit smelled of burnt wiring and sweat. The overhead panel blinked with errors, red lights blinking like a Christmas nightmare. Captain Doyle, gray-haired and wide-eyed, looked up as Emily stepped in. "You're the passenger?" he asked, voice raspy. "Emily Carter, former Air Force cadet, certified CFI. You called me." He nodded quickly and motioned her into the right-hand seat. The co-pilot was slumped to the side, unconscious. His oxygen mask was on, but he wasn't responding. Emily checked his vitals instinctively. Pulse weak, shallow breathing, likely a pressure-induced faint. She slipped into his seat without hesitation. "We've lost the left engine completely. The right one's overheating. Autopilot's dead. Navigation systems are glitching. We're 28 minutes from Seattle, but we can't make it." Captain Doyle explained fast, wiping sweat from his brow. "Also, we've lost ATC contact." Emily scanned the panel. Years of muscle memory kicked in. Though commercial jets differed from the smaller aircraft she trained in, the basics hadn't changed. Lift, thrust, drag, and gravity. And calm. "Okay," she said, slipping the headset on. "Let's get this bird steady." The yoke felt stiff. Emily adjusted trim manually while switching power to emergency backups. The horizon display flickered, then stabilized enough for her to recalibrate pitch. Slowly, steadily, she and the captain brought the plane out of its steep descent. Below them, jagged terrain loomed, snow-dusted mountain peaks and thick pine forests. They couldn't land there, and climbing back to cruising altitude wasn't an option with one failing engine. "I need maps," she said. Dot. Captain Doyle slid over a backup tablet with offline terrain data. Emily scrolled fast, scanning coordinates. "There," she pointed. "Mackenzie Ridge, abandoned airstrip from the Cold War era. It's not on modern flight plans, but it's within glide range. It's rough, short, but it's our best shot." The captain stared at her, amazed. "You sure about this?" "No, but we're running out of airspace." They adjusted their course manually. Emily sent a brief emergency ping through the secondary system, just enough to alert nearby responders. With their coordinates, no time for conversation, just data. Meanwhile, in the cabin, panic had turned to eerie silence. The flight attendants relayed short, vague updates. "We have additional support in the cockpit." Passengers clutched armrests and prayed, still unaware that the support was another passenger. Back in the cockpit, Emily glanced at the altimeter. "We need to slow descent. We'll come in hot. Too fast. I can try flaps." "Negative. Hydraulic systems down. We'll do it manually." They rerouted power to stabilizers, trimming the aircraft's angle of attack for a shallower descent. The stick vibrated with tension, warning them they were flying too close to stall speed. Emily adjusted gently. They flew lower now, just above the tree line. Flares glowed faintly ahead, tiny dots in the vast dark terrain. Fire crews from a nearby town had raced to the strip after catching the emergency ping. Makeshift landing lights were set up. Car headlights, flashlight signals, anything that could help guide the plane. Emily locked eyes with the captain. "You want a lander?" he asked. Dot. She shook her head. "You're in no shape. I've got it." He hesitated and slowly took his hands off the controls. The captain of a 170-ton plane surrendered his plane to a woman who was supposed to be sipping orange juice in coach. Emily wrapped her fingers around the yoke. Her shoulders tensed, but her heart was strangely calm. She'd failed flight school, not because of skill, but because she was told she wasn't built for pressure. Funny how pressure brought her back. "Landing gear," she muttered. The indicator was dead. She toggled the switch manually, hoping gravity would drop the gear. A thud sounded beneath them. One down? Maybe. As the plane angled toward the narrow strip of cracked concrete in the wilderness, Emily inhaled. "We're either landing or we're writing history." And with that, she began descent. The plane pierced through thinning clouds, emerging into open airspace. Beneath them, the Cascade Mountains stretched endlessly, rugged, dangerous, and unforgiving. The abandoned Mackenzie Ridge airstrip was still 10 miles away, barely visible from the sky. Emily leaned forward in her seat, every muscle focused, calculating pitch, descent speed, and glide ratio in her head. The wind howled against the damaged fuselage. One engine remained barely functioning, coughing and sputtering with uneven thrust. Emily throttled it carefully, knowing too much strain might shut it down completely. She didn't speak, neither did the captain. There was nothing more to say. In the cabin, passengers clung to their seats. Some prayed, others cried quietly. A few simply stared out the windows, watching trees rush beneath them as if it were their final view. No one knew that the woman now guiding the plane had once walked away from aviation, told by her instructors she was too emotional to handle a real crisis. Today, emotion was her fuel. Back in the cockpit, Captain Doyle blinked through sweat. Descent path's too steep. I know, Emily said. There's no room to arc in. We're coming straight in, short and fast. The airstrip wasn't designed for jets. It was an ancient military runway, barely long enough for small transport planes. Overgrown vegetation lined both sides. One wrong move, one gust of crosswind, and the aircraft would overshoot or shatter on impact. Emily took a deep breath. Her hands were locked on the yoke, white-knuckled but steady. She trimmed the nose slightly upward and reached for the manual landing gear lever. The wheels had dropped, but without hydraulic pressure, they might not lock. I need a visual on gear, she said. The captain used a backup inspection camera. Grainy black and white footage flickered to life. One gear's down, the others can't confirm. We're landing either way, she said. 3 miles now and makeshift runway came into view. Fire trucks and rescue teams flanked the path with their lights on, providing faint visual guidance. Civilians stood behind a police line in stunned silence, watching the giant aircraft crawl toward their hidden town from the sky. The cockpit alarms began to wail. Stall warnings, low-altitude alerts, hydraulic failure signals. Emily shut off the noise. There was no time for warnings now. Either she landed this plane or they all became a story buried in the mountains. Captain Doyle reached for the yoke. I've got it, she said firmly. He leaned back. In 25 years of flying, he'd never seen anyone take control like this, especially not someone who'd boarded as a civilian, coffee in hand. With one hand, Emily adjusted throttle. With the other, she manually flared the wings. The plane tilted slightly, heading dead-on toward the narrow strip of land. The tail rudder twitched as the last bit of power gave out. Now it was glide only. Emily grit her teeth. Come on, just a few more seconds. Below, the ground raced upward. The front wheels hit first hard. Then the rear slammed down with a metallic scream. Sparks flew from beneath the cabin. The landing gear wobbled. Tires shredded from the friction. The plane bounced once, twice, docked, then steadied. Emily slammed the manual brake controls. Smoke poured from the rear. Passengers screamed as oxygen masks swayed above them, their bodies tossed forward by the deceleration. The aircraft skidded for what felt like forever. Then jolted, finally lurching to a dead stop just 40 feet before the tree line. For a moment, there was no sound. Then inside the cabin, a child whispered, "Did we just land?" A roar erupted. People cried, clapped, laughed. Flight attendants hugged each other. One collapsed to the floor in relief. In the cockpit, Emily slumped forward, her hands still on the yoke. Captain Doyle broke the silence. "You just did what most pilots couldn't. You didn't land the plane, you saved a world." She didn't answer. Not yet. The world outside rushed toward them, flashing lights, rescue workers, chaos. But inside that cockpit, Emily Carter was frozen. The passenger was now the pilot. Emily sat still in the cockpit, her breath shallow, heart pounding in the quiet aftermath. The aircraft was stopped, the engine silent, the sky outside darkening into dusk. Inside the cabin, the dim emergency lights bathed everything in a soft red hue. She could hear the sobs of passengers, the disbelieving laughter, the gasps of survival. But in her seat, her hands still gripped the yoke. Her brain hadn't caught up yet. She had done it. They were alive. Captain Doyle turned toward her, face pale, expression unreadable. For a moment he said nothing, then slowly he extended his hand. "That was the most impossible landing I've ever seen, and you did it."
Emily blinked, looked down at his hand, and finally let go of the yoke to shake it. Her fingers were sore. She hadn't realized how tightly she was holding. "We need to get the passengers out," she said. Her voice was rough, barely audible. Doyle nodded. "Emergency exits. Let's move." Outside, emergency crews were already racing up to the aircraft. Firefighters sprayed the overheated engine with foam, while paramedics prepared stretchers. Not knowing what to expect, the cabin doors opened, inflatable slides deployed, and one by one, passengers began evacuating down to safety. Some were carried, others crawled, a few simply kissed the ground. Emily exited the cockpit last. She stepped into the cabin and for the first time met the eyes of those she had saved. A woman with 2 children clutched them close and mouthed, "Thank you." An elderly man tried to stand and salute her. One teenage boy just stared wide-eyed like he'd seen a superhero. She didn't know how to respond. She simply nodded, moved through the aisle, and helped guide the last group out the rear door. When she finally stepped onto the cracked concrete of Mackenzie Ridge, a cheer erupted. Not organized, not even conscious, just spontaneous, raw, and deeply human. Survivors clapped, cried, and pointed toward the plane behind her. Paramedics rushed over. "Are you injured?" She shook her head. "I'm fine." The co-pilot, still unconscious in the cockpit, he needs help first. They rushed past her and she stood there motionless, surrounded by the chaos she had narrowly beaten. Searchlights cut through the night, helicopters arrived, reporters began to swarm behind the police line. News vans were already rolling up the Ridge Road. Emily turned and looked at the aircraft. Burned rubber and scorched metal marked its desperate skid down the makeshift runway. The landing gear was buckled but intact. A miracle, really. A miracle built on training, instincts, and the part of herself she thought she had buried years ago. Captain Doyle walked up beside her. "They're going to want your name, your face, your whole life story." She didn't answer. "They're calling it the landing of the century," he added. "But between us, I've flown for 30 years. I would have never tried that. I would have ditched in the trees." She looked at him finally. "You were doing everything you could. You brought us down far enough to try. That mattered." He nodded once gratefully. "But you were the reason we walked away." Photographers gathered nearby. One tried to approach with a microphone. A reporter shouted, "Mum, were you really just a passenger? How did you do it?" Emily turned away from them. "I'm not doing interviews," she said quietly. "Not today." She found a quiet spot by the fire truck and sat down in the back bumper. Someone handed her a water bottle. Her hands trembled as she opened it. She'd done something no one expected. Not her colleagues in tech, not her family, not even herself. But deep down, a truth was forming. She hadn't landed that plane in spite of being a woman, or a former pilot, or a passenger. She'd landed it because she never stopped being who she was, even when the world did. By morning, Emily Carter's name was trending across every major news outlet in America. Headlines read, "Passenger lands plane after engine failure. Civilian saves 181 lives, and former Air Force trainee performs miracle landing." Her face, taken from a blurry passenger photo snapped moments after the landing, was on every screen. Stunned, silent, sweaty, but alive. She hadn't spoken to the press yet. After the landing, she'd spent the night in a small fire station bunk near the airfield, refusing interviews and ignoring calls. Her phone buzzed nonstop, reporters, military officials, even movie agents. But Emily stayed quiet. A knock came at the fire station door just before dawn. It was Captain Doyle.
"Doyle, they've asked us both to appear at a press conference in Eugene," he said. "FAA airline reps, the governor, they want to honor what you did." "I didn't do it for honors," she muttered. "I know. That's why you deserve it." Reluctantly, she agreed. She owed the passengers that much. As they rode down the Ridge Road in a black SUV escorted by police, she looked out the window, trying to process what had happened. She hadn't even told her parents yet. They were probably seeing everything unfold on TV with the rest of the country. The press conference was chaos. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved toward her. She stood beside Captain Doyle, who gave a heartfelt speech, praising her courage, calm, and skill. Then it was her turn to speak. She stepped up to the podium.
For a moment, she just stared at the sea of cameras. "I was a passenger," she began. "But I'm also a trained pilot. One who walked away from flying years ago because I was told I wasn't cut out for high-pressure situations, that I wasn't suited for emergencies." She paused, voice steady but sharp. Well, this was an emergency. Reporters scribbled furiously. Emily continued. "I didn't save that plane. Alone. The captain gave me space. The crew stayed composed. The firefighters lit the runway. Everyone played a part. But yes, I flew the plane. I landed it. And I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I had to, because people were depending on someone to act." The room went quiet. A beat pass. Dot. Then applause. Dot dot. Polite clapping. A genuine thunderous ovation. When she stepped down, people were crying. One FAA, a director, embraced her, whispering, "You've just inspired every young woman who's ever been told she can't do something." Over the next few days, the offers rolled in. Major airlines wanted to hire her, military officials asked her to come back into service, book publishers emailed with advanced deals, a famous talk show host requested an exclusive appearance. Hollywood studios circled for rights to her story, but Emily wasn't interested in fame. What caught her attention was a single handwritten letter. Dot. It came from a girl in Kansas, 12 years old. She wrote, "I saw you on TV. My brother says girls can't fly planes, but I saw you do it. I want to be like you." That was the moment something shifted in Emily. This wasn't about just surviving a disaster. It was about showing others what was possible. Dot. She contacted the airline. "Instead of a speaking tour or a sponsorship, I want you to fund a flight training scholarship for girls, minorities, anyone told they're not cut out for it." The airline CEO personally called her to say yes. That week, the Emily Carter Flight Academy Fund was born. And while she still refused interviews, she did make one quiet appearance, visiting a local flight school in Seattle to speak to young cadets. Her message was simple. Courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you take the controls anyway. Asterisk, weeks passed. The frenzy cooled, but Emily Carter's story continued to ripple through the nation. Aviation schools reported a spike in female applicants. Young girls now carried notebooks with her quotes written on the covers. At airports, strangers stopped her. Some cried, some hugged her, all thanked her. Still, Emily avoided the spotlight. She had no publicist, no social media presence. She kept flying, but from the ground, as a mentor, not a hero. One evening as she locked up the small flight academy she'd helped open outside Seattle, a black government vehicle pulled into the lot. A tall man in a uniform stepped out. "Miss Carter?" he asked. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Shaw, U.S. Air Force." Emily felt her chest tighten. That name, that uniform, it pulled memories from the vault she had closed years ago. "I remember you," she said. "You ran evaluations at Maxwell Base." He nodded. "And I remember you. You had the best hands I'd ever seen in the simulator, but you quit." "I was told I didn't belong." Sean nodded, as if expecting the response. "You were told wrong, and some of us knew it. But the system, it didn't know how to value what it couldn't measure." Emily folded her arms. "Why are you here, Colonel?" He pulled a small folder from his jacket and handed it over. Inside, a recommendation letter, a formal invitation, a reinstatement package. "We want you back. Full certification, advanced tactical and emergency response training, civilian or military track, your choice." She blinked. "This because of the landing?" "This is because the world saw who you really are under pressure, in chaos, when lives are on the line. That's not something we teach. That's instinct. That's leadership. And honestly, we need more of you." Emily stared at the papers. She hadn't sat in a real cockpit in years before that flight. And yet when the moment came, her body knew what to do. She'd faced the fire alone and made the impossible choice. But going back... "I'm not interested in being a symbol," she said. "You already are," Shaw replied. "But what you do with that, now that's the part you still control." He left her with the folder. No pressure, just a nod of respect as he drove off into the dusk. That night, Emily sat on her porch, staring at the sky. She remembered being 16, standing on a runway for the first time, watching fighter jets roar into the clouds. She remembered how badly she wanted to be part of that world, not to prove something, but because she loved the sky, the silence, the power, the freedom. And she remembered the day she walked away, after being told she wasn't tough enough, calm enough, command material. But now she'd landed a 170-ton commercial jet on a broken airstrip using instinct, memory, and sheer will. Something even seasoned captains said they'd never attempt. And people weren't applauding because she was lucky. They were applauding because she'd done what few others ever could. She opened the folder again, reread the letter. The words didn't pressure her. They invited her. That weekend, she made her decision. Docked. She called Shaw. "I'm not coming back in full time." There was a pause on the line. "Understood. But I will teach," she said. "Not in classrooms, in the air, with real trainees, real emergencies. You want pilots ready for chaos? I'll show them what it means to stay level when everything is falling apart." Shaw laughed softly. "That's the best possible outcome." The next week, Emily Carter began a new role, special instructor for advanced in-flight emergency simulation. She trained not just on theory, but on mindset, instinct, and the rare courage to act when no one else will. The woman who was once just a passenger now shaped the next generation of pilots. It had been 3 months since the landing. Emily Carter had found a rhythm, part flight instructor, part mentor, part quiet legend. She avoided fame, but she couldn't avoid legacy. Flight academies around the country requested her as a guest trainer. The Carter Fund, her scholarship program for underrepresented aviation students, had already funded 12 new cadets. Her days were long, full of simulators, student drills, and quiet afternoons in the hangar. One rainy evening, as she finished a debrief at the academy, her assistant walked in. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "He says he was on your flight." Emily froze. She stepped out into the lobby where a teenage boy stood nervously, damp from the rain, a duffel bag at his feet. He looked up and gave a sheepish smile. "You probably don't remember me. I was in seat 23C. I watched you walk to the cockpit." Emily stared for a beat, then slowly nodded. "I remember." He took a deep breath. "My name's Jacob. I was flying to Seattle to live with my dad after my mom passed. I thought that flight was going to be the end of everything. I was sure I'd never land." Emily softened. A lot of people felt that way. "But you changed it," he said. "When I found out it was you, a passenger that landed us, something in me shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about it." He reached into his bag and pulled out a worn notebook. He opened it and flipped through pages filled with sketches, airplanes, cockpits, diagrams, checklists. "I want to fly," he said quietly. "I want to be like you." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. Jacob continued. "I've been reading manuals, practicing on simulators online. I work part-time at a mechanic shop to save for lessons, but it's going to take years. I thought maybe you could tell me what I need to do." Emily stepped forward and took the notebook from him. Flipping through the pages, she saw potential, not just in the sketches, but in his eyes. She saw what she once had, a hunger to rise, to control the uncontrollable, to escape gravity itself. "You have the right instincts," she said. "You just need the right tools." Jacob smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Tools cost money, I know that." Emily handed the notebook back. "You ever heard of the Carter Flight Fund?" His eyes widened. "That's yours?" She nodded. "It exists for people like you, kids who got a second chance and want to use it." Jacob was speechless. "Fill out the application," she added. "Better yet, don't bother. You're already accepted. Your full training will be covered." He stared at her, lips trembling. "Are you serious? I don't hand that to just anyone." "But you showed up. You came here. That takes more than most people realize." Jacob tried to speak, but instead hugged her, sudden, tight, full of every emotion he hadn't said. Emily was surprised at first, then returned the hug. "You're going to fly, Jacob. But more than that, you're going to lead." That night, after he left with his acceptance packet in hand, Emily sat alone in the empty hangar. Rain pattered on the roof. Outside, mist curled over the runway lights. She thought of all the things that had brought her here. The dismissal from the Air Force, the years away from the skies, that cursed flight, the panic, the cockpit, the impossible landing. Then now, this boy. She didn't need trophies or headlines. She didn't want medals. This was her legacy. Changing lives one quiet story at a time. The years that followed were a quiet revolution. Emily Carter never sought fame. She didn't chase accolades or television appearances. Instead, she built something far greater. A community of pilots, dreamers, and survivors, inspired by her story. The Emily Carter Flight Academy became a sanctuary for those told they couldn't, wouldn't, or shouldn't fly. Jacob graduated first in his class. His name was now one among dozens of young aviators who owed their start to a passenger who once took the controls in an emergency. Women, minorities, and underdogs found wings through the Carter Fund, soaring where doors had been closed. Emily herself returned to the cockpit once more, not as a passenger, but as an instructor. Confident, calm, and fierce. Each flight she led was a lesson not only in mechanics, but in courage. She taught pilots to trust instinct, to embrace fear, and to own the moments when everything seemed lost. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the golden sun dipped below the horizon, Emily sat by the window of the small control tower at McKenzie Ridge. The runway was repaired, modernized, and busy with new planes, a far cry from the abandoned strip that once saved lives. She watched a young woman taxi a small plane down the runway, lifting into the sky with practiced ease. It was Jacob's sister, another scholarship recipient. Emily smiled, feeling the familiar pull of the sky in her chest. Her phone buzzed. A message from Captain Doyle. Flight 982 reunion next month. Your place of honor is waiting. She typed back, I'll be there. But let them know I was never alone up there. That night, as she prepared to attend the reunion, Emily reflected on her journey. From the passenger seat to the cockpit, from fear to leadership, from silence to legacy. She realized that heroism wasn't about glory. It was about the quiet strength to act when no one else can. It was about lifting others when they fall. It was about turning moments of crisis into chapters of hope. As she boarded the plane once more, this time as a respected pilot and mentor, Emily felt the sky wrap around her like an old friend. The hum of the engines, the rush of wind, the endless horizon. They reminded her that every flight, every moment was a chance to rewrite the story. She was no longer just a passenger. She was a pilot of lives, dreams, and futures. And the sky, vast, unpredictable, and beautiful, was hers to command.